Are you tired of hearing people talk about culture and they don't do anything about it? Well, you're about to meet somebody who does. This is about the power of perseverance, facing potentially the greatest challenge you can face in your life, and knowing you can depend on your team both personally and professionally. This is a story that you absolutely must watch because it features how you can face adversity, how you grow a company that's mapped to the culture that you infuse into it. This is Chris Gherardini. This is the DiscoPosse podcast, and it's on now. Hey folks, welcome back. This is a really, really good show. I'm Eric Wright. I'm the host of the DiscoPosse podcast, and this is a chat with Chris Gherardini, founder of Turnkey Technologies. He's doing really, really neat stuff around the consulting in SaaS platforms, especially around work that's being done with a lot of the Microsoft platforms. So we dive in. And this goes much beyond that with just Microsoft Dynamics, but how he runs the organization, how he built a successful company based on consulting, how he infuses his culture into a team. It's a must watch. So you're going to hear an incredible story. Stay tuned. You definitely need to hear this from front to back. This is Chris Gherardini of Turnkey Technologies. Oh, that's right. And if you do me a favor. Make sure you hit subscribe so you can keep in touch with us and see more great episodes like this. So I hope you enjoy the show. This is Chris Gherardini on the DiscoPosse podcast, and let's jump in.
Hi, this is Chris Gherardini. I'm the CEO of Turnkey Technologies. Glad to be here today, and this is brought to you by DiscoPosse Podcasts.
This is neat. When I was reading through your bio, Chris, and looking through your history and what you and the folks at Turnkey are doing, I was excited because it brought back good and challenging memories of living in the world of Dynamics and ERP and CRMs and craziness. So it's kind of cool, and I'm excited by the chance of talking with you on a bunch of things today.
Excellent.
But for folks that are brand new to you, if you wouldn't mind, Chris, introducing yourself and then give you kind of the quick little pitch on what Turnkey is.
Sure. Thank you. So Chris Gherardini, CEO. I'm the founder of Turnkey Technologies. I started this business back in 1994. So, my background, I'm a technical guy, electrical engineering, computer science, and math, and ended up in public accounting back in the 80s. So the story is we married accounting and technology. Today, 27 years later, Turnkey is a Microsoft Dynamics partner and licensing distributor. We focus on implementing business applications. That is ERP, which is Enterprise Resource Planning. It's essentially financial software, operational software, and then the other complementary part is the customer relationship management. So really, Dynamics 365 is the core focus of the business. About 85% of it is the ERP solution. So love doing it. Love solutioning.
Yeah, I worked in finance. I've been in tech for a long time, and when I started, and I was in retail before that, so it's funny. I started to see Dynamics show up here and there back in the day when it was brand new, and it was kind of funny that at the time. There wasn't really, ERP was generally new. There was a lot of POS systems. Then there were some back end systems. SAP was kind of a major player. And then Microsoft had this Dynamics platform come out, and I thought, ooh, okay, this is neat. And in fact, it's one of those sleeper hits because it's not like people don't generally go, you know what I really need? I really need an ERP system that's, and I think Microsoft's my first, these are huge systems that are sold in a very different selling pattern and consumption pattern.
Correct.
So and your audience is different, right? It's not a typical like B2B type of sale. It's very much like people are saying, look, I've got a GL that I'm got to integrate with, or I've got to replace or whatnot. So how did you get, obviously it tends to start with, hey, I've got a consulting gig and they need help with this thing. And then you say, hey, I'm particularly good at doing this thing. We should probably do it for a second customer.
Sure. So the way it began is again, I was a comp sci student, and I had a customer that I got connected with when early, and they needed software for orders and inventory and accounts receivable. And so the very beginning back in the 80s is I actually bought Great Plains software from a gentleman, and I learned the accounting. But I think to that point is understanding business applications and business process. I loved it. Again, my background was geared more towards scientific application development, but the business applications had a lot more tangible value to me. You delivered a very computable ROI, return on investment, from improving business process automation. And so the diversity in the different businesses that I get to interact with has been rich over the years. I see what people do, how they do things, how they make their money, who's efficient in making money. And so, again, there's a passion today as we deliver these solutions and see people really realize the value and grow their businesses and scale efficiently. So it's fun. I'm still passionate about it. And again, the solutioning, it's complex, it's challenging, but that's part of the reason we continue to want to do it. And accounting keeps a lot of the technical people out of our space too. There's a high discipline in understanding business process, but debits and credits and the accounting is certainly it's not easy to endeavor into. So that's been the other thing that I really liked about the space. And about 85% of the business is ERP these days. So it's a pretty tight space to get into.
It becomes that neat thing of, just like anything that they talk about, if you can find a niche and then you've got a strong, addressable market in that niche, it's a fantastic place to live because, anything in ERP, they're very unique. They're basically a framework. It's not a product. And you have to then map your processes to it, map it to your processes. When you talked about that, I think that like the business process analysis is something that most people just don't have the heart to kind of chase down and figure it out. And it's very enlightening when you talk to customers and you say, "Hey, we're going to build the system to map to what you do. What exactly do you do?" And like actually unpacking the whole process. I'm excited by that. I love doing automation work because anything you do with process automation, it lets you kind of uncover the warts that are going on in the back office.
Yeah, so one thing to share though is we don't reinvent the wheel. And so with the Microsoft Dynamics 365 platform, these ERP systems basically have inherent business process management. So most organizations really need to adopt and adapt to those processes. And don't get me wrong, there's still gaps and they still want to customize it a little bit, but most people don't say, "Hey, build it the way I'm doing it." And we're saying, "I'm
Right.
sorry, there's a much more thoughtful approach here. Maybe you should look at how that's being done and adopt that without reinventing and then extend it to where it doesn't exactly meet the business." So there's a few different approaches. Whereas, back in the early days, the 80s and 90s, a lot of it just didn't exist, and so you did have to build more. There was a lot more architecture from the ground up, but some people still want to go out and architect the whole thing, and that's not the most efficient approach to
Yeah.
addressing business processes. But
In the end, they probably build the system they could have bought
yeah, you don't want
after
to
a
build a
lot of
general
work.
ledger. Nobody wants to build a general ledger. Why would you do that? Most of the focus is around it's the billing, it's integrating with an e-commerce, it's something that we do in manufacturing or in projects. So normally it's in those deep subledgers where personalization is required. But normally the core accounting functions are pretty generic, and we don't need to focus on reinventing those. So
When we get into GL, like I remember the days of, hearing like every GL replacement or integration project, they're huge, right? They used to be these massive undertakings, but because of the way that software's, taken a lot of that pain out, I think, how have you seen the evolution of these kind of big projects over the course of, the advancements in dynamics and the better understanding that software should play more of a part in these processes?
well, and again, there's simple and there's complex. And so some businesses are simple and their implementations are rather straightforward, but then there's organizations that do have pretty extreme complexity in the way they do business. And I think that's it, right? It's not a one size fits all. That's something that's nice, is that you can scale up in the complexity. So to that point, there are small projects, but there's projects that last multiple years because of the complexity. And again, those customers do want to completely architect or customize some processes that may be unique to their industry. So there's still, like I said, we still get small, we still get large, but as I said, that framework of out of the box business processes, there's so much there that you don't have to reinvent. And even in the Microsoft cloud, the governance is there. You don't have to deal with security. You don't have to deal with governments. You just have to implement it and configure it, but you don't have to certainly build it and architect those things. But and that way you're focused on just those key issues that those exceptions, right? And exception-based management is a strategy as well. You don't want to touch everything. You don't want to fix everything. As they say, don't boil the ocean, right? You don't need to boil the ocean. Just focus on that particular aspect that needs to be addressed.
The cloud and the governance thing is always interesting. And I remember the early days of anything in cloud. It was always there is this weird gut reaction of like, well, I don't want to put my data in the cloud because there's a risk. And you're like, you say to yourself, look, if Microsoft gets this wrong, they lose every customer. If you get this wrong, you're the only one that's going to pay the price. Do you want to own governance, security, like all of this stuff? I'd much rather lean into the multi-billion, or now trillion-dollar company who will lose everything if they get it wrong once, because it makes the news.
No, it's so true. And again, to extend an application underneath that Microsoft cloud of governance, even if you start using Power Apps or Power BI, knowing that it's all umbrella as opposed to it's off to the side, and all of a sudden we have nefarious people that can get access to that. So again, you're right. I don't want to be in that business. My company, most of everything's in the cloud for us, and so we don't make that investment in having to deal with the governance. I think we focus on, again, the things that define our business. So.
As the world is becoming more aware of the value of data and the way that we can, get insight from it, I'm curious, you talk about Power BI and more environments that I walk into, even in my own company, where I would never have thought that Power BI would be a thing that I'd bump into in my own business. But it's, as we bring more and more data from disparate places, I'm seeing more and more really neat stuff that's going on in these companies where they're leveraging these tools and they're saying, yeah, I've got a Dynamics, I've got all these different products, I've got customer facing, I've got internal operations. I'm curious as well, Chris, like how much more are you seeing people really make use of data that they kind of already have?
Well, that's the secret, and that's actually a hidden gem in these projects as well. And a lot of customers focus on it too late, but there are more mature organizations that really do understand what their key performance indicators are in their metrics, and they've composed them so that they can hit the refresh button and see them change daily. So that's just an evolution of maturity. Because your point is right. Maybe the data's already been there, but then as they start getting into it, then they start focusing on gaps in the data, meaning, oh, I'm missing a dimension that would let me really look at revenue by customer type or by a product type. And so I think it's maturity. But to your point, there is an increased focus on that, and it's not just for internal consumption; it's for external consumption. How do I show my customer his data to improve his behavior, or maybe I show my vendor his data so he knows his shipping performance is below average, and he works to see his report card improve. So there's a lot of new techniques, and again, even through the mobile apps and through Power Apps, to be able to disseminate that data to the frontline workers who need it. And I think that the timing of it, right? We expect now. Expectations is a word I use. Is the expectation has changed. It should be real time, right? It should all be connected. I shouldn't have to wait 60 days. So expectations are driving, the delivery of tools that really start taking advantage of data that people have had all the time. You know.
I often, you look at the world and you look at what influences, and obviously there's business and process stuff, and more and more when I hear these things and I have these conversations with people, I hear a lot of Eli Goldrat and the goal and sort of Toyota manufacturing, lean, all these things come in. But in the end, no matter what methodology you pick, it's generally wrapped around insight and data. And if you don't have a way to get that data and then begin to massage it into get a KPI, as you said. Yeah. I'm curious as well, you know, how how do you help people surface a real KPI out of a sea of information, data that's because we always say
Sure.
we're data rich but information poor. Is I think
Yeah.
the phrase people always say.
And normally it starts with, where's the problem, where's the unknown? And, we'll use an example where we have a customer that does extreme amounts of picking in their warehouse. And we had to create analytics that show the picks per minute by worker. Well, wow, that's some granular data. But what it surfaces up is, performance in the warehouse. And there's a perfect example where I'm going to find out who's my weakest link in my warehouse. And again, benign assumptions, everybody performs, but there's somebody or something. And I think it's to create that granularity. So, there's a lot of stuff that surfaces right out of the box. Microsoft's been very thoughtful about tools people need to manage their business. But again, to that point, this worker productivity one is a very micro look at how quickly are they picking boxes and getting them on the shelf. And when they found a worker, hey, well, this guy's got to go. He's 80% below everybody else, but he was hidden in the pack. But that's just one example of exposing an exception. And again, we want exception-based management. And I think as organizations try to scale without throwing labor at it, they're focusing on analytics to help them make those better decisions. So it's just maturity and evolution, in my opinion. So
Yeah, it's funny when you think the way you say it actually makes sense. Quite often we spend too much time looking for patterns when in fact we should look for the deviations. It's the exceptions that should be found that are probably faster to discover, and then from there we develop the pattern that it's outside of. Like it's a which is the chicken and the egg when it comes to pattern versus exception.
well, tolerances. What are my tolerances? Variances, and you're right. And we lift where people are outside of that, and then we got action. We can click on them and have it do something. So we didn't say that actionable information as well, where I don't look at it and I have to go do something that's disconnected, but I'm connected. And to your point, right? Lift the ones that float outside the tolerance. The list gets shrinks as I'm doing work, but that's a perfect example of also driving worker productivity. Is we use the analytics to surface cues of work they should be doing, right? Instead of the traditional guy, my inbox is empty, I have nothing to do. Well, not in our world. Our world, it's continually propagating workflow approvals. Hey, this item's out of stock. I need to, again, all these different exceptions that need an action to go with them. So it's a whole different world where we connect intelligence to actions for the workers, and then literally put it into the digital inbox that we expect them to just perform through. So
If you think about the way that, I mean, I remember as a kid, I was a grocery packer, do like nighttime duty, stocking shelves, and then every week you do an inventory, and it was like literally paper inventories, and they'd take that and somebody would aggregate it together, and then they would go over the pick list and the order, and it's like it wasn't that long ago that a lot of the world ran that way, which is probably why I think people still struggle sometimes with the feeling that software is taking my job, but meanwhile, what it's doing is it's keeping your business in business to keep your job, in my opinion.
but there's an expectation that people evolve as well, right? And your point is if you're static and everything moves forward and you don't move with it. But again, as you get more and better tools, you have to learn how to use those tools. If you try to stand and plant your feet, those are the people that fail out. And again, young, mid, old, everybody has to evolve. And I think that's what the technology and the tools, it's just that. It's just new tools. And again, you want to learn them, you become more efficient. That worker has 30% more capacity because he learned how to use the new tool. And I think that's expectations of management is just people just adopt. And adoption is a big challenge in the business. Everybody says, oh, I'm not going to learn it, or I'm not going to use it, and they can't force me. And those are old heads, and new heads are embrace, embellish, right?
Yeah.
Make it better, and anyway, resistance is futile.
I think that's exactly.
It is. You either get on the train or you're left behind, frankly. That's.
You've got an excitement level about these things, Chris, that I think is helpful in being able to get other people to, believe in you helping them with it. Yeah. How do you stay passionate, and you know, how early on did you realize like this stuff is really neat to me?
It's interesting is I'm one of these personality types that I get bored and I think of traditional employment. It's like, boring, same thing, same day. My world is different every day. I get bored. It's like, oh, different customer, different complexity. But as you think about the tools that I have to bring to bear, it's just how do I teach people? How do I show them that it's not a daunting task, that there's an on ramp, that it doesn't have to be big bang, and there can be incremental gains and implementation. And so, but for me to tell that story and share enthusiasm and inspire people or create vision. I'm big on vision. Hey, we play that. We're from Missouri. Show me, I want to show you. And it's all about creating vision where people are in the box and they don't know what it's like on the other side. And we talk about bringing things in or going out and bringing things back, but vision is a great way to begin that understanding of what's possible. And again, a lot of people just haven't seen examples. And I know I get excited about that, and I'm a lucky guy. I've got a wonderful team of people that work for me. I mean, quite brilliant people. So I think that keeps it fun. If I had to do it all by myself, I'd be tired of it. But you still get tired. But again, it's fun. And like I said, the people that we deal with, that's the richness the business is great, they're productive, they're successful, but as you look at impacting individuals, both inside orgs and outside orgs, that's, I mean, you got to enjoy it. What are we doing in life, right? We're trying to make things better, and the continuous improvement, whether we're doing it internally here or externally. But that's it. And I take care of myself. I go out and purge all the bad stuff by hiking in the woods so that I have capacity to absorb the things that aren't perfect. And again, keep being positive, looking forward, right? So
Yeah, and when you started Turnkey, what was your vision as you know, we were filling out that LLC, you're doing incorporation and you're saying to yourself, this is what I want this to become.
it's I told somebody that 27 years later, I didn't know that it would get to this. I don't think I saw this. And the story is I wrote some multi-currency software for an ERP back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I ended up spending 5 weeks on a Dutch island, came back and quit my job. So really the catalyst to walk out the door was that. But being an accounting firm, I learned how to do business end to end. But the vision was in early, I was turnkey. I was hardware and software, right? Turnkey. We're going to have a fully integrated, not going to have to fight. Oh, it's a hardware problem. It's a software problem. Remember that back in the
That's
in
right.
the in the 80s and the 90s? So I'm like, we're going to get rid of that. We're going to be your one-stop technology shop, and that was the vision. And I've pruned it a bit. We got out of the infrastructure side. We wanted to focus just on biz apps. But I think that the focus, and I've stayed true. I've been doing the same thing. I mean, I'm it's accounting software. If we go back to the terminology in the 80s, now we call it ERP, and everybody's like, what's ERP? I said, well, okay, it's
Yeah.
more than just finance and accounting. It's operational. It can be service. It can be, you get it. But anyway, the vision has stayed true. And again, I've kept it focused on Dynamics. And again, I started with Dynamics in the mid 80s. So it's pretty interesting that, but it was accidental to some degree. It was a survival instinct. And as I crawled into biz apps and accounting, I loved it. And I thought, okay, I have a math degree. So it's easy math. Really, but it really makes a lot of sense too. So anyway, stayed
Yeah.
pretty true to the course, frankly. So
Well, and I think that's really it's funny when we look back and there's a beautiful combination of preparedness and accidental preparedness. It's you were always ready for being able to take it on, and then as you worked hard, this luck thing comes along. There's definitely luck. Like luck is a real thing that involves and how we run a business and chain of events and customer acquisition, because we have every chance to lose a contract as much as we have to gain it.
right.
But it is a very good pairing of having vision, being personally empowered and excited about executing that vision, and then building a team that can carry that same vision with you. When you started on your own, was it just you at the very
Just
beginning,
me.
Chris? Yeah,
Just
yeah.
me. I took out a second mortgage on my house, and I moved in. I had a customer who had a big warehouse, and he gave me a little room. It was like 7 feet wide and 40 feet long, and that was my crib. And I moved in with him. He didn't charge me rent, and I bartered some services. But yeah, I was alone for my first year and a half, and I mean, I did well. I mean, I did a $500,000 in business my first year out all by myself, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And again, part of that is capitalizing, and do you have enough cash to turn around and make that first investment in a resource? But yeah, I ran solo a year and a half, but then I never looked back after that, and I started pulling people in, and then that's why we eventually pruned off the hardware, because we had 20 people doing hardware and 2 people doing biz apps. We're like, okay,
Wow,
we want to do
yeah.
biz apps, and so we got out of the hardware, and people were confused about, well, are you hardware guys or software? I said, okay, we're going to be application guys, and that was a big difference. And that was mid 90s that I shifted and had a retail store. We're building boxes. Everybody's building PCs back in the day, and we shut all that. And like I said, just got laser focused, and it allowed us to add resources and professionals because everybody had the same focus. And we ended up with a lot of accountants and CPAs. We had a lot of accountants, me coming out of an accounting firm. So it was very different for a technical technology firm to have accountants. But like I said, it was a very good way to drive the business growth for me.
The arrival of cloud services and shared services, and it was ideal, but you'd already kind of laid the groundwork that, like, I'm just going to be focused on the process and the software. And then while that was going on, all of a sudden the world kind of gets that cloud as a great place to host this stuff. So it really was good timing. But I think regardless of that, you would have found success even if the cloud hadn't necessarily been the place that it would take off.
Yeah, it's the infrastructure thing. Is it on premise? Is it cloud? And I mean, there was a transition from on premise applications to cloud because the revenue models changed, and there's a lot of partners that fall out there because you're used to getting big transactions, and now all of a sudden you're getting monthly recurring revenue, and you're like, okay, so there's a valley of death you have to cross there as you transition from the traditional on-prem licensing models to the subscription. We did that. We're way past that, but anyway, it's just interesting to your point. And again, we've always been not the IT partner. So now Microsoft's the big IT partner for most of the cloud, and you still deal with on-prem IT partners. And there's people that have in Microsoft Cloud or Amazon Cloud or whatever, and they still have an IT partner per se. So we've always had this exterior relationship with the IT partners. Microsoft just gets easier to deal with on the infrastructure side because they're pretty quiet. They really aren't you know in the face, so to speak.
The the innovation in their platform too has probably been pretty fantastic. Beyond just like getting the data in there and being able to use it, but like I can imagine there's all this, lots of external services you can tie into. They've got AI and machine learning that you can tap into. Like how exciting is it to have watched just that platform and what you can do with this information now grow over the course of your career?
Oh, you're the kid in the candy store. I mean, when I say that I'm blessed, is I mean, I get internal use rights for this stuff, so I get to consume this. I run my business on the 365 platform, the CRM, and the finance and operations. And to your point, to watch the APIs and the artificial intelligence, and now they're letting insights read your ERP data and your sales data and your marketing data and say, hey, you should do this. And again, bots and the evolution. My guys have built bots, and I'm like, brilliant. So yeah, it's the kid in the candy store, and with power apps and all the toys, again, it's an amazing platform. And so for us, just to that, once a customer's there, they can increment. I need this, I need that, I need this. But it's the kid in the candy store. But you're right. I've watched, and we were back in the '80s. We carried luggables, and we talked about dial-ups and bag phones, and there wasn't an internet, and now we don't drive to customers, we work remote. So it's been a beautiful evolution. But to your point, the apps have just the sophistication, and the process has stayed core. But again, the surrounding extensions and the experience is what we've watched. It's been wonderful. And for the user community, for end users, it's like I said, the functionality that they're delivering, and the thoughtfulness. And they spend a fortune. They spent like $19 billion last year on R&D. So but like I said, there's so much cool stuff you can't play with it all. Even the AI, I'd love to jump over there and play with the AI because it's so neat. I mean, it really is. And where's it going to go from here? I can only imagine. We talk about the things we see and what 5 years is going to bring, and we try to imagine how quickly things will change. So a lot more good stuff coming. That's the way we feel, and that's exciting. As a technologist, I'm sure you're, like I said, the kid in the candy store. So
Yeah, it's every day I think this is the greatest day to be in tech.
it's
Like
not too bad.
it is, and obviously with like what we've gone through in the last, 16 months almost at this point, and or very much at least the last 12 months, we saw the world change so much in the world of business and the way we interact. And if we didn't have what we have as far as global ubiquitous access to software and cloud services and like remote access and high bandwidth connections, like this stuff has been, it's been a terrible ordeal on the world, but it was less terrible than it could have been, because if we didn't have these tools, like how could we have ever done it in
I would agree.
81? You there's I just it's unfathomable what
It
it
would have
would have
crashed.
been,
It would have crashed
right?
to a degree that unrecoverable to some degree. But you're correct. A lot of companies like us, we didn't miss a beat. We talked that we've always worked remote. We just came into the same building to do it. So for people to not show up in the building, everybody just showed up and logged in and did their work like they always did. But you're right. If the platform, the foundation, the internet, the tools hadn't been there, there's a lot of businesses that would have really been compromised. But as a result, we've seen very rapid evolution and pivoting into collaboration platforms, right? So
Yeah.
very different on camera, right? A year ago, I wasn't on camera. My guys are like, "Hey, your camera's on." I'm like, "That's okay. We need to work. We need to
Yeah.
work the social here." And they're like, "I don't want to be seen." I'm like, "Okay, well, evolution, right? Evolution." So
One thing because you've been in the business a long time, you went through a few waves of like the insourcing, outsourcing, offshoring. Like we saw a lot of changes in the way that businesses were comfortable in consuming things and the prices that they were willing to pay, and where offshoring became very interesting to a lot of CFOs in the mid to late 80s and early 90s. And then in the late 90s and early 2000s, we saw a lot of onshoring like that. I saw a lot of repatriation of process management and development. So you've been running consultancy throughout many of those waves. I'm curious, Chris, like how did you see your customers perceiving your value as you saw those waves of, a lot of people are like, hey, look, I can outsource this to wherever, and it seemed like the right thing. And then, right now it was less popular. We're seeing, some stuff come up, but being a North American company and being able to say, employ and service. Yeah. I'd love to hear how it's gone for you and your opinion of it.
Sure. And and even today, and as your point back then, offshoring, why are we doing that? We're looking for lower cost labor markets. And I think even today we use some resources that are offshore for development services, but it's narrow. And my team is all based in the US, and my project managers and even the business analysts and the people that would write specifications that would go over to maybe in India, and we've got nearshore down in Costa Rica, for example. But I think that the models change. There's still things that you can send over there, and it's been typically as we see big projects. I've got a group that's doing 6,000 hours of development, and that made sense to send it over there. But there's a huge team of people US based, profound language and articulation skills that are writing the specifications, interacting with the customers. And I think that, in that model that you can successfully use offshore, and there's certainly other parts of the business that can move over there that are going to be cost effective, that there's not going to be any degradation in service by using those type of team members. But some of the challenges where people thought, I can just throw it over there. Well, you need layers. You need a layer over the resource offshore, and you need a layer here. And so there is an overhead model that has to be in place to support effective use of those resources. That being in place, no problems. But I think the CFO goes, I'm going to get an offshore guy. Is he managing him? Like I said, there's an inefficiency that comes with that if the CFO's there. But CFO, hey, I got a CIO. Oh, I have a dev manager. My dev manager is managing the offshore guy, and you got layers in there. But like I said, to have the CFO just reaching in for one guy or a firm, there's still some missing components in there is what we found. And that was really where we had the challenges years ago. Language, time zones, right? Hey, I need a PM here. I need a PM here. Otherwise, so
right. No
with those
proxy.
mechanisms in place, you can get efficiency. But again, between language and time zones, like I said, those sometimes present challenges. I have nearshore teams and I have bilinguals on my team to deal with that, and it works very, very well for us. But again, a very small part of our business is actually outsourced outside the U.S. at this point. So
there's definitely yeah, and I remember at one point Ireland became like the hot spot for, like, they did a lot of real tax advantages and they built a ton of call centers. There's like this one, I forget, this one region in Ireland, and it had like the most bandwidth coming into it because there was all these call centers and service centers that were being put up there. And I at the time I actually worked at Sun Life Financial. I could say that because people just go on my LinkedIn, they can figure out where it is. But anybody that called in would know, you hear this beautiful Irish, this sort of Gaelic hint on the voice as they're calling in for things. And what was fantastic was Sun Life was in Canada, you're bound to do everything in fully bilingual. And in fact, it was French first because they were actually originally a Montreal, like a Quebec-based company. And so they are very strong. So you'd hear this incredible French with this lovely Irish brogue over top of it. It was kind of funny. But, it was truly the language had to map. And that's why, certain functions are not as efficient, or it's hard. I don't want to say customer friendly, but like there is a challenge in that proxy of language.
there is, and there's some people US based that don't want to have to try to interpret. I've had people that were, I don't understand. I'm like, okay, be a little bit more open on interpretational language. And I think that goes back to the personality type that we're dealing with. Some people are going to be fine with that. And, everybody's got an accent versus you get it. And that's also another one of those inhibitors for some organizations. But that's where those layers of, do I have a BA? Is he dealing with them? Is there a little bit of buffering going on there? And Microsoft does have a data center in Ireland. And Ireland, there's some interesting things over there at a big company here. I don't know names, but I'm like, oh, you got an Irish subsidiary? I go, what do you do there? Oh, we sell to them and then they sell to us. And I go, do you move product? No, it's just paper. I'm like, okay, that's some tax stuff. There's absolutely some tax stuff there. As you look at why do I route that through there and I don't actually move any product over there or anything like that. But very interesting. So
Yeah, that's it's always, even when you see like shipping and logistics companies, and lived in Vancouver for a long time, and I would like talk to people at different companies in mining and logging, and the weird thing was how much stuff they had to do purely for tax purposes. They're like, we literally drive trees around like from one side of the city to the other all day long because we don't pay taxes when it's rolling.
that's so
But if
funny.
and so that I used to laugh. I would say you'd go on the sea to sky highway from Vancouver to Whistler, and you'd see a big logging truck go one way and then a big logging truck go the other way. And all I would think in my logistics brain is, why didn't they just not drive the opposite direction, just unload
Yeah,
the
yeah,
truck
yeah,
in
yeah.
either side? Doesn't seem like it makes sense, but it's
Hey,
all bloody taxes.
that's it. That's it.
Now, one thing I'm gonna put you on an interesting spot because I read it in your bio and talked about some of the questions, and the question came up and says, how does cancer change the culture at Turnkey? And
Woo. Yeah, yeah.
we didn't talk about it at the start. If you don't mind, I'd
I don't
actually
mind.
like to explore that.
It's an interesting, this is that January of 2018. I'm like, what do you mean I have cancer? I'm like, I don't feel sick. So that was, organizationally, it scared everybody, as you can imagine, and it scared my kids, my family, and I mean, I went February of 2018. I went and had a 9-hour surgery where I found a tumor in my neck, and I had ear pain, and of course I persisted and got it, and then they said, oh yeah, yeah. I'm like, so, but a lot of surgery and then a little break in between, and then I did the 6 weeks of radiation. And I'll tell you, that's a day by day struggle. And my team really, you talk about the inspiration and the motivation, and when they kind of rally behind you and they're like, "We got this," it's impactful. And so and I don't hang it out there. I've got new people that showed up that don't necessarily know that. I had somebody told me I should write that story but the organizational just gathering around me and supporting me was just it was huge. I mean, you're checked out. I don't know. I wouldn't recommend radiation to anybody. I did 6 weeks of it. It's a nightmare, and what you have to eat and drink to get yourself through it. You can't function. I mean, that's the best way to put it. But they have an
Yeah.
organizational support you like that. And it was 40, 50 people in here that they're family. I mean, and we look at it today like that. The people that are in here, they're family. They're extended family. We're very careful about who comes in. But again, we support each other. And I think that even philosophically, as I pivoted past that, changed my benefits. I pay for short-term disability. I pay for long-term disability. And I said, you need this. And, stuff shows up and I don't ever want. And so even supporting people that go through their own personal challenges, we're a little bit different because, you got a guy like me that says, hey, whatever it takes. And
Yeah.
so that's changed. So my approach to benefits to the people to making sure they have balance, I stick my hey, take some time off, go do that, do the right thing. But it's changed me and how I look at things. It's changed the people. And again, as they and many are here from before and through this, and they've watched the research. And so again, as we got the business as I got my legs back under me, yeah, I mean, just the support, and they're like, he's back, he's really back. And so for them to hear me speak and be back to my energy level, I don't have my same weight. I stayed skinny, but otherwise, it's a pivot point in life. I mean, it changes you. I don't know how I can't. I mean, I don't obsess on it. I think I'm still on that Caribbean island. I tell people I went on vacation for 6 months because mentally that's a good place to think about as opposed to horrors of being radiated every day for 6 weeks. But anyway,
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
interesting it is. So
It's got to be, and I'm thankful that you're, on this side of it, and
I'm
it's
good.
it's a it's a
Absolutely.
journey no one deserves to have to take.
I
It's
would agree.
really
I would agree. So
your your personal positivity and vision is probably what infuses every day in building the company, and that allowed you to, you know, you create the team that you want to be on, and that allowed you to, when you needed to say, hey, look, I need to step back, I need to deal with this. It you basically hired a bunch of yous to be turnkey, and it
yeah, to a
shows
degree,
itself out that way, right? It
it does.
only in this is the only thing I would say, like, even like with marriage, with everything, when it's easy. When you really test relationships and trust, is when it's difficult. And there's nothing more difficult than watching a leader have to step away and really trust that the ship is going to keep going, and like someone else is
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to
yeah.
take the wheel.
We grew in 2018. I'm like, hey, all right, thank you. I'm like, is that a little? So thanks, guys. I mean, they kicked ass. They really did. I mean, and so there's kudos to that. But to your point about picking people that you want to be around, life is short. You spend time with your workers, your mattress, and your car, right? Have a good car, have a good mattress, and have good people to surround you. Because, and I think to your point, yes, it is imperative that you're surrounded by people you like, and that you like working with, and that you have common values, and you love the challenges, and yeah, and it all shines when somebody has a rough patch. Hey, you support them, and I think that's the overall philosophy that we have in this organization, and it shines through. So, but yeah, thanks for asking that. It's interesting.
I wish we had more, people that would get the hard part is when you live through it, like the lived experience can fundamentally change how you approach things. And, I don't doubt it really changed a lot of things you talked about, like your healthcare review and stuff. But I think, luckily your personal vision was always there. But I often tell people like, look, I work in a startup too. And I see this thing all the time where you're like, look, there's no one's going to say, hey, you know what, Eric? You should take a few days off. No one will ever say that. In fact, if you ask for a few days off, they're like, hey, can you wait till after product launch? And we've got this thing coming up. And like, it's a constantly rolling machine. But what I've really appreciated about my team is if I just say, hey, family's sick or whatever, it's immediate. It's just like, we got you. What do you need? What can we help with? And it is I was telling somebody yesterday, I said, I wish that we could all have, like, you should just have a thing where you can have it. It's just like a mulligan where you can just say, look, I'm taking my week, and just like out of the blue, just like shut it off.
Go
Cause when
check
it's
out. Yep,
yeah,
you got to check out. And I think people don't always know when they need to. So you got to have good meters on people, and again, they sometimes need a nudge to go do it, and people guilt themselves out of doing stuff that they need to do, and I think that's a different problem in life. And post cancer, I don't guilt about stuff. I rationalize whether I should do things, but and I tell my wife thinks I don't say no to myself enough, but to that point, people do guilt themselves out of that. And to take a step back and not to be ridiculed or deprecated because of that, I think it's completely, and to have the support of your team, I think that's even more important, is to feel comfortable. That's when you really find a home, when you know that, hey, I'm okay, I can have some transparency, I can tell people what's wrong, and I'm not going to be judged. Right? So
yeah, it's the tough part is that I wish we could have that experience without having to live through the experience. Like, I wish we wouldn't have to have the negative to
yeah,
to
yeah.
give us that
Yeah.
understanding of it. So yeah. Now, again, when you run a business and you have people that you effectively are taking responsibility for, like as you bring new team members on, what do you look for, Chris, when you're bringing someone on board?
It's a great question, and we've done a lot of recent hiring. We brought in new director level positions, but part of it is culture. How well do you fit? I mean, certainly, we want to look at the holistic person, and I'm not round peg round hole. So, but the culture piece is important. We see a lot of our workers from Minnesota all the way down to Texas, a huge belt. But we've got people on the east and west coast. But certainly, geography can speak to culture. What's your, but the talent, the transparency, and again, the experiences. But a lot of it is, again, we want the people. We want they have the academic, they have the experience, they've got the culture to come in, join, and then to grow in the organization, because it's just that. It's like, hey, you show up today, you can do these 10 things. Great. In 3 months or 6 months, you're going to be able to do 15 to 17. And so there's an evolution and an expectation that people want to come in and grow and learn. And they look at our organization, we're growing, and so it's exciting for them. And like I said, we get those matches. Normally, it's a good win. And we've been very successful at attracting and retaining people with very similar values and cultural opinions, and again, ambition for the business. So
Yeah, well, and that's really what it is. You want to excite them about their ability to impact lives and businesses and customers and themselves and their teammates. Like, when they have a feeling of really being able to have a meaningful impact, I think that's a feedback loop to, like, I did a good thing today. I want to do that tomorrow and next week. Like, it's giving them that ability to really see where what they do has a real result, whether it's, like I said, on their peer group internally, or and especially, on the customer side. It's amazing to be able to do that versus like the sort of massive machine organizations where you just come in like kerchunk, all right, put in my time card, and it feels like that some days where you're just kind of grinding it out and going, checking it off like a jail calendar. Yep, year 22, only 4 years to go when I make my numbers.
In valid point, and I'm in a CEO executive group, and the focus even last week's session, it's all about humans. It's all about people. The joke is that lady's book, I built a team and humans showed up. But you get into and again, what you're talking about is consideration, which people need to be recognized. They need to feel valued, and they need to see the outcomes of their efforts so they can feel value. And they're like, hey, satisfaction. And that's all part of managing people. But there is a lot more focus on that post-COVID as you look at, okay, and they are the crux of all businesses is the people. And so if we're not machines, but to your point, techniques and culture and alignment and how do they feel satisfied and that they're being paid attention to, as opposed to, well, I'm number 137,003. Nobody
Yeah.
knows who I am. And they don't even know if I don't show up for work. I mean, that's a terrible situation to be in. So you want to know that, oh, they know if I'm not here 5 minutes and they miss me. Well, is that a good thing? Well, it could be both, right?
Yeah, and even like, especially as you do the first hires, the thing that I've often heard, and it's the best way I heard it described, which has probably been used repeatedly, was Diane Green, who she actually founded a company called VMware, and a little company called VMware,
A little company. Yeah.
yeah, but she was told by her mentor, be careful with the first hire because the first 10 will hire the next 100. And so you have to make sure that that culture and your values are infused in that core group so that when you're giving over the responsibility of hiring and building the rest of the team to those people, because you can't directly affect, like, you can obviously, you're part of bringing those people on board, but at 80, 90, 100,
We agree.
150,
We agree.
right? It's
Cultural imprinting and validation. Again, you're right. You're relying on the team to vet people and to find that alignment, and even some of that. I need to be more formal about the core values of the company, so everybody sees them and they go, "Oh, okay, that guy." Oh, no, they don't align there, and even to get better guidelines for what is the basis to measure those people on fit and so forth. And you're right, it's not me. And as I get further and further away, it's like I have to trust those people. Normally, someone shows up and says, "We decided on this person. Can we hire him?" And I'm like, okay, we have a casual chat. I'm like, all right, we're good. But
yeah.
yeah, it's gotten, and again, we're at 60. I see us getting to 100 people at some point here in the next few years. But you're right, I'm not going to hire them all. So thank God, and I
That's
don't have to manage. I don't have to
right.
manage them all either. Thank God. No, I'm laughing about it, but
Well,
it's an interesting.
and again, sort of a forcing function. When you had to step away, what were you surprised by when you got back?
Like I said, they fulfilled my belief. They really did rise to the occasion. I mean, it's just that simple. And they were like, "We got this," and they did, and they performed well, and they worked well as a team. And I'll tell you, there was less drama during that period than there was after. People are, they're like, "Oh, Chris is better. We could go back to our roughhousing." But no, it was just that they really did come together. And I think that I don't think that I was worried about it. But again, the performance was really, they punctuated it with business performance. So certainly the revenues were there, the profitability was there. Again, the team did well. They delivered on projects. Like I said, I saw greens across most of the metrics that we're using without my direct involvement. So it was all positives, like I said.
Well, they say that culture is how they behave when you're not there,
Yes,
and
yes, yes, yes.
you've done well, sir.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, there's still more work. And as you grow it, like I said, there's people that have been here a long time that they're like, man, I don't like where we're going. And that's always, and then there's, like I said, but it's not a big departure from where we've been tracking for the past 20 plus years. So
But and that's the other thing that's always tough to explain to people. Like, it's very natural. I mean, it's like I call it's like a rocket. Like there are stages of the rocket, which at certain elevations and altitudes they
exactly right.
shed the stage of the rocket. It's and there's I didn't appreciate it as much until I was in a startup and I realized that I work with people like these people are fantastic at what they're doing. And then we would hit a certain milestone of revenue. And then they're like, all right, I'm out. Like they just like, I know how to do 1 to 20 million. That was like, that's their sweet spot. And you look across their LinkedIn history and you're like, oh wow, they do this build phase very well. And then once it gets to that point, they're like, too big company for me or
Got to
whatever. Like
go.
they
Interesting.
so
Good. Good
it is
analogy.
normal, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
there's nothing wrong. In fact, one of the best things you can do is let somebody go on to a thing that's more appropriate for them rather
I agree.
than
I agree.
hold
And
on to
we
them.
talk about that. People get in the wrong roles. They don't have all the skills and traits to perform that role. And maybe there's a better role that's more comfortable for them. And you think about the stress they have being in a role they can't fully perform. And to that point, as the company grows, it's like, hey, there's more demands. And you're right. And people need to be real with themselves. And I think that's where, right? Don't fraud. Admit your weakness and say, hey, I can do better. But you're exactly right, is to find that better match. And people that are happy perform better. Like I said, I don't want miserable people in roles. They're not gonna do what they need to do. So it's a great point.
And when it comes to other culture things, and you talked before yourself about you kind of go off in the woods, you got to take some time out and hike. What do you do at a sort of a corporate level? Do you ever do like sort of the getaways or things like that? How do you revisit that, you know, group culture?
Yeah, we don't do corporate trips, but what we even have right now is we've got a subgroup we're taking to Atlanta the 29th of March, so 2 weeks. I'll get my PMOs and my practice directors, and there'll be 7 of us in a session for 3+ days, and that's again, part of that is I haven't sat in the room with any of these people. I have practice directors in Minnesota and Atlanta and in Virginia and in Seattle and in St. Louis. Like, okay, so but part of it is we need to bring that group together. And then we've got another event, probably in May to bring the directors to St. Louis. And so we're bringing people in because now we've got people all over the U.S. So we're all remote now, where we had everybody in the building before. Most people are all over, but we're working that, and then social Zoom calls, and again, even for the local team, we did breakfast with Santa. That was me. So I had
Ha,
in
ha, ha,
December, I
ha.
lined up and people could sign up and go to the Pancake House here in St. Louis and have breakfast. So we're pushing the social. We used to bring lunches in all the time here, and for the people that are in the office, they're happy that we're doing lunches now and telling the other workers, "Come in, Chris is buying lunch." So we're working that, and I think that the Zoom calls. The problem with that is people show up, they do business, they get off, and I think what we've learned is that people build those relationships over eating, drinking, and talking about stuff they do. And Zoom calls are narrow and focused, and you get off and you lose that because you're not in the building together. So we're forcing that. Again, I've got a great HR manager that, again, proactively, how do we work people and continue to support the culture? So I'm sure those are the kind of things you're hearing is what are the techniques? Because we're not going to mandate people have taken jobs. They don't plan on moving to St. Louis. So we're never going to have
Yeah.
everybody in an office building. And we've got people leaving St. Louis because like, I don't have to be here anymore. I'm going to Florida. Well, that's fine. So anyway, new challenges, right? Is you've got you know, try to keep people working together, and
Yeah.
harmonizing, right? There's a lot of challenges.
Yeah, working together apart, I think is the
Yeah,
something that we started
hard.
to figure out.
Working
But
together
it
apart. You're right.
but it's difficult. Like you said, when we do, I recently went through the all company kickoff, and so you got 700 people that are all over the place, mostly in like you could walk to each other's houses, but you're on a Zoom call, and like you said, the difference was the real team building doesn't happen during the Zoom call. It used to happen over breakfast and for people that are going out for a smoke break and people that are,
That's
having
right.
the awards banquet. Now the awards banquet is the last
Sure, sure.
45 minutes of the Zoom call. Not the same thing.
No,
it's and then the evenings you'd have like natural kind of, I'll call it sort of coagulation of teams where people would they would clump together, and you even get to do the thing where we would sort of force, like when we would do team, like scavenger hunts or whatever, you would specifically say, I want to build groups that are not normally together. And it allows people to kind of like meet new faces that work at the same company that they don't normally meet, and they become friends. You realize, oh wow, you play guitar too, and oh, you cycle too, and that's the stuff that really like makes that team culture exciting.
oh, it does. I mean, Christmas party in December. Okay, we didn't get together, so we pushed out oranges and stuff. But I would rather have my group. But anyway, and you're right. We've done some of those. What are those safe rooms where you get locked in with a group
Yeah,
and you have to
yeah.
figure out how to get out? We've done those. Again, we've done dinner theater. So yeah, I miss all that. And I think to your point is even why we brought lunches in regularly is to get the group sitting talking. And anyway, but yeah, everybody's got challenges to figure out how do they come up with programs, where they're remote workers and how do you make them feel part of the team, so that they get along. Because when people don't sit next to each other, they tend to be, and they fight a little more. And you're like, come on, guys, kumbaya,
Yeah.
right? Anyway,
Yeah, well, that's the thing I always tell people is like when you learn something about somebody that's personal and you develop a personal connection, it makes you behave differently in a work function because you are committed to their personality, not their function.
correct.
And it's hard to build that when you're hiring 100% remote right now. And like, how do you suddenly find out? Like, I do a mentoring program, and one of the things I built an app to help connect people up. Partly because I was like, I'm going to see if I can do this. And the whole function of the app was to better match people. And someone said like, well, so I'm going to put in the thing I'm looking for. Like, I want to learn about dynamics. I want to learn about CRM. I want to learn about cloud computing, whatever. You're like, well, that's actually only like one thing. In fact, the most important thing is like, what do you like to do? What are your favorite bands? What are your favorite books?
Right.
Because what I found builds the better mentoring engagements are built by better personal connections. And I'm more likely to say like, hey, Chris likes, going out and hiking in the woods. Like, oh, that's awesome. I used to live in Tennessee. And you're like, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, this is cool. So then when you say, hey, so how do we handle this project we're working on? You care way more about working with that person because you're differently connected to them. I think we need that, and
I
it's
would agree.
harder to find. Well, we'll get there. I think one advantage I believe is that we really democratized access to work. It used to be based on geographic location, right? Like I couldn't work for Turnkey if I live in New Jersey. Well, now I can. That
Sure.
barrier's kind of been lowered,
A big deal.
which is nice to have. I'm excited by it, and even we're seeing like a lot of San Francisco folks, they call it the delocation. There's some companies that literally, I forget which one, I think it was Zappos that was doing a thing. They actually would pay you. They're like, look, we give you $25,000. Get the hell out of the Bay Area.
Leave. Yeah.
And they would offer a fee for you to delocate because they wanted people to like, I guess it cost them like operationally to, keep people and pay for transportation tax and, and healthcare. There's probably different, like, look, if you're in Wisconsin, I can probably run you as an employee a little less expensive and you'll probably be happier than
Than
if
being in
you're,
California. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Interesting, isn't it? The delocate. Okay. Yeah, because we used to relocate. We had
Yeah.
people move to St. Louis, and and now we had a guy move from Florida here. He's like, "I'm going back to Florida." I don't blame you. I'd like to go to Florida too. Anyway, I can't leave. Kids are in school here, so but it's just funny.
Yeah, well, that is the interesting thing is that as much as we say like, hey, people can go wherever, you're like, we're not really unattached to the thing we are. Like, I love this idea of complete freedom. All I need to be is near an airport. I'm like, well, but my kids are in school.
Yeah,
I kind of need to stick it out where I'm at there. It's not just a matter of heading out to the brush, and finding a place that's less expensive to live. You're like, no, my kids are actually genuinely
that's it.
attached to the
And
neighborhood.
family, and there's reasons people do hang on to geography. It's not, if you're single, great, go anywhere you want, right? If
Yeah.
you're light, no roots, right? So, but yeah, and the bigger
Yeah.
challenge as we talk about workers is imagine the kids coming out of college, the young hires, and that is the bigger issue. And I think that is, I've got, because where do they get the example? And we talk about mimicking, and if that in the proximity of other people, right, you mimic. From earliest, we learn how to speak by mimicking mouth movements. So think about what you lose by not having somebody that you can watch. And a mentoring's part of that, but that's still not the same as I get to mimic and I get to watch the behavior and assimilate vocabulary because you get a higher density. That's the other thing. But it is a challenge. And as we hire out of college, I think there is a real challenge for those kids as they go into remote positions where they don't really get to be indoctrinated, blueprinted, imprinted, whatever you want to call it, into.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in a CPA firm. I love it. What they did for me is amazing. The professionalism, the mannerisms. I mean, I mimicked and I borrowed everything and made it mine. And again, I can't imagine not having that dense experience with this wonderful group of professionals. It just totally influenced me. But again, you think about the new world, and there's challenges, like I said, and not everybody's going to come back to in person because, to your point about cost savings, right? I've got a building I'm in here. I'm going to rent half of it probably. I've got a client that's got 1,400 workers, and he's in St. Louis, Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, and he's got these big office buildings that are empty. He's like, Chris, and I'm like, same thing. He's not bringing these 1,400 people are not coming back into the building. And guess what? The clients don't want them in their building either. So these
Right.
1,400, they're all, and that's just one example, but that's just, again, we're going to continue to see those shifts. And, some of my team thinks 22 is going to be tough because the real estate market is going to bite at some point. I think right now everybody's got long leases, so there's nothing they can do but pay for empty space. But yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to see a lot more change, I think, over the next 2+ years that a lot of people aren't anticipating. So anyway.
Yeah, whenever I see an advertisement for something that's like REITs, and anybody that's in real estate, investment, and it's always like, we've seen a 300%, year over year growth. Past performance is not indicative of future results. I'm like, boy, oh boy, is that phrase ever so important right now?
You got a disclaimer in there that, yeah. No,
Like
I get it.
this is like, I remember the vision that I can tell people that they always will recognize because they saw it on a YouTube video is like people standing on that beach in Thailand going like, hey, look, and they're pointing out because the ocean is going out. And I'm like, that's what we saw the last 9 months to 12 months. Like at first it took a while before you realize, oh wow, okay, we need to all get out of these buildings because we can't be together.
Yeah.
And then it became, oh boy, we need to figure out how we're going to pay for these things. And then suddenly leases will expire and people can get out of that. Well, all those businesses and all those physical buildings, the wave is going to come back, and like the
Agree.
financial impact is going to be profound, and it will take a decade for us to really live it out. It's worked in investments and insurance companies for years. They go through these actuarial tables and they're like, you do this, you do this, you do this, you're going to die when you're 71, like on average. Like so like that's how they measure. It's like all about risk management and understanding
Yeah.
the finance of risk. So now I'm looking at this going like, people are like, oh, this is going to be great, we're going to be back to something soon. I'm like, we haven't actually seen the full effect of a lot of it.
No, we have not. We have not. And even you hear the supply chain impacts that are starting to come out. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but I'm hearing it in my executive group, and they're saying they've got big problems. And a
Yeah.
lot of people are just not aware, like even microchips. They said, oh, Ford made 20% less F-1500s, like because of shortages of microchips. And now one of my guys says they can't make foam seats for cars, so they've stopped production lines. And like, really, chemicals, it's inert chemicals that
Wow.
just are. And this is just one example of, but even in the home building industries and some of the materials, the delays have gone from, hey, it was 3 weeks, now it's 12 weeks. So there's a lot of other stuff that's continuing to bite that people are not aware of, that hasn't really fully showed up yet. So to your point, more surprise is coming, and I think a lot of people just have to, we'll get through it, but there are more changes, and people are going to have to continue to evolve. So
We definitely learn we are resilient people, and it's again, we talked before about, your cancer experience, and the no one should have to live the experience to gain the experience. Like I wish we could impart the wisdom without having to live the experience.
kind of like the Matrix, right? Let me just
Yeah.
stick that back. Hey, I'm better. I actually used to imagine a USB port that I could fix you a little bit. So after I went back and took a lot of psychology when I was 28, after saying people don't work right, comp sci guy, right? What's wrong with you? Anyway, I get it. I get it. We're all right. All right. I'm laughing. So, but you're right. How do you give them that profound wisdom without? Fortunately, it doesn't work like that, because if I tell you, you're not going to listen. Anyway, people are just funny.
Well, even in your own background, like as people that purely looked at numbers, there was a point where, through the 90s and 2000s, and we saw, the work of like behavioral economists that, started to win Nobel Prizes for economics. And they're behavioral psychologists. They're like, why is Daniel Kahneman winning and Amos Tversky winning Nobel Prizes for economy, economics rather? And I'm like, they're not economists. They're like, no, but guess what? There's something inside the numbers that isn't in the numbers. And it was understanding behavior. And so it's neat. What made you go the route to start to look, get and study psychology as you
So
were at that point?
It was graduate school. So again, my undergrad is computer science and math. I spent my entire career in the engineering and the math building. So I never stepped in the business building. And what I'd been doing accounting software at a CPA firm for 10 years, I thought, yeah, I'm going to go take a financial accounting class. And so it was me gapping my skills and wanting to go back. And so I took some formal accounting classes and filled in some gaps on balance sheet and income statements that I was like, all right, that makes a lot of sense. But then I chased organizational psych, some management psych, and I needed the people side that I didn't get in my undergrad, and I took the business classes, and I think that just filled in for me because a lot of owners, they grow up. You're an engineer, you grow up, and you're sitting in the chair. You're like, I don't know how to do this job. I've never studied that, and you end up short. Well, I'm the guy that I self-assess, and I do that to my workers. Like, wait, I need to fill in. You need this knowledge so that you can make those decisions, and that was it. It was just it, but it was, I didn't. It was a 66-hour master's program in management information system. I didn't finish it. I needed this. And I'm like, all right, I'm good. And I went on my way. And obviously I had enough to start the business and run the business. And, but that was it. It was just me cherry picking where I had gaps. And, because of my undergrad, I could take some advanced comp sci curriculum, which I liked, where I learned more about algorithms for business apps, as opposed to doing scientific cubic spline algorithms. So it's like, that's a whole different deal. But anyway.
Yeah, but I think we need that. I wish there was a like just enough organizational psychology. Like there's like just enough project management courses and just enough, accounting courses, like to give people enough understanding of it to then relate to the people that do that. And one thing I wish there was more of is like understanding behavior and organizational psychology, like human resources stuff. The hard part about human resources as a function, it's as much a legal and like
Absolutely.
benefits thing as it is a real organizational development, which is, unfortunately, human resources. You look at the words, it's human resources. Like, how do we manage these resources and
Yep.
empower? It's not as much about empowerment as about legal protection of.
Well, it's a variety of things, but I think even the people focus on how do we bring educational programs that help augment their skill sets, because we know that we gave all of our directors project management classes. Let's continuing to give them more, because to your point, people have gaps in their academic educations, and unless they bump into somebody in life, they don't get that experience, and even so, they may only get 20% of what they need to know. It's like, oh, I did PM, we didn't see the whole picture. So we're
Yeah.
proactively doing that, but again, people don't always drive themselves to pursue knowledge. And again, as you talk about human capital management, that's a whole different field, because there is a lot of complexity and there's legal requirements. And yeah, I rely on somebody else to kind of do the interpretation to make sure that we're ahead of the curve. So
And one thing before we finish up, Chris, and thank you for this. It's been a really good
no,
sort
I
of
appreciate it.
wide-reaching chat. You talked about, people coming out of college today, and you and I, we shared some fun stories of the 80s and 90s, and it's interesting because I believe my behavior today is much defined by living through change in life through these decades. So if somebody comes out of college today and they haven't experienced a couple of decades in, how do you think that they've like how will their behavior and their experience be coming into the business world now when they've got broad access to cloud and software and social media and phones and all this stuff? We grew up in, like you said, luggables and car, like phone that was in a bag that
Yeah.
it was like $1 a minute to talk on it, stuff like that. I'm curious what your thought is on if someone's coming out of school today, how do we give them the appreciation for, what they've already got?
Yeah, that's hard because, and depending on their experience and where do they land in their first job, do they develop the disciplines? But again, those experiences are so different and the expectations are different too, on how people work and how much they should work and where they should work from. So, you know, and that's a tough one. And I think, again, it's depending on your first, where do you land and what's the structure that's taught to you? Again, there are firms that have training and onboarding methodologies where they really take you out of school and it's just the beginning of learning and they groom you and they give you that. And then you know what? You've got some direction going forward. But if you get a first bad experience, it's like, oh, did you learn anything? And again, what expectations or perceptions of what work life should be? I've got people that don't want to work a lot of, I mean, again, they don't work for me, but I have examples where they don't really want to work as much. And so there's a lot of challenges. And again, are you in an office where you get structure and you get indoctrinated and you're good going forward? I still job of that. But I think if depending on where they land, that's going to be my perspective is, do they get that good direction where they can carry that forward and evolve with it? Like I said, I landed in a great place. Not everybody gets, most engineers don't become part of a public accounting firm where you really learn about that whole other side of professional services culture. So
Yeah.
again, I still think experiences are going to drive that outcome.
Yeah, I hope that people throw themselves into that stuff. That's I think truly is the best way that I learned how to be in my team was to go outside of my team. Like working in a large firm, I would talk to the network team and talk to the storage team, talk to the insurance salespeople, and really get infused in how they did things. And then it really colored how I did things in my own little micro team. And then when it came time for advancement, well, understanding the business was more important than understanding the technology in the end.
True. True. Our technology changes. Again, you're correct. The fundamentals of these different organizations and the way they do business are endure, frankly. So
Well, this has been, it's good lessons for everybody. And Chris, I'm happy. I'm going to come out of here. I'm feeling bloody good about my day right
good.
now. You're a pleasure to share time with, Chris, and
Appreciate the opportunity. Like I
this is.
said, so
And if folks want
thank
to get
you.
a hold of you and they want to reach out, what's the best way they can do
Yeah,
that?
the easiest way is the website, turnkeytech.com, turnkeytec.com. Again, you land on that page, there's live chat. Just say, hey, I want to talk to Chris. I want to talk about solutioning. You can get to me pretty easy. There's submit forms. They all come to me. So I see everything. But that's the easiest way to find us. Go to the website, and love to have a conversation with anybody that's looking at changing business applications or just wants to talk about vision. So, but
Excellent.
thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
Appreciate the opportunity.